So I am the featured reader coordinator, and last month we filled up the whole calendar. I'm really excited about it. So, anyway, for tonight, Pat Mattingly's short story collection, Fractured Hearts, houses 4 award-winning stories. Her short fiction has also been published in numerous anthologies, including Writer's Digest award-winning fiction, internationally acclaimed short stories, and prize-winning writings from Rome. Her first novel, Benjamin, won an award as a manuscript and was a New Century Publishing finalist. Kat's 5th literary suspense novel, Katya, was launched a few weeks ago at Roundabout Books, and just this month received a Literary Titan Award for Outstanding Fiction. Please welcome.
I'm glad the lights went on. I didn't think I could read in the dark. Well, I'm wearing black for a reason. I see a lot of beautiful pink and red here tonight, but I apologize. It is Valentine's Day, but I'm reading from the darker side of romance. Sorry about that. This is the story. It's a short that won with Writer's Digest. And it's been published for a while because they don't call them shorts anymore. Now they call it flash fiction, and they've got other categories, but it's a really short story. And it's called Cheating Paradise. My view from this room has deeply affected me, like a painting that speaks to the soul through the artist's brush. At first, all I saw was the very average and dated decor. When slipping through the sliding door onto the deck, disappointment was further felt at how small the inlet was, with its white sandy beach, barely bigger than a picture postcard. But slowly, the view from my deck transformed, became interesting as it gathered personality and depth, just as you did. The cumbersome black lava dock that seemed less than picturesque with its noisy machinery, at second glance, is the backdrop for the tiny boat-studded bay. Dock activities, upon even closer examination, are one intriguing event after another, and never boring to observe. The sailboats bobbing in the sea beside the broad dock have set my heart to dreaming uncovered dreams that have no boundaries, no rules to fence me in. There is just ocean blending into sky as my thoughts soar unrestrained. I have observed the mood shifts of this scene outside my window, created by the different shades of light and array of sounds, just as I know your moods by heart. Each morning, a rooster crows in the distance while pigeons coo in nearby palms. The sky glows a soft pink, and hills beyond the bay shimmer in a rosy mist. Canoes and kayaks are neatly arranged on the early morning shore, and there is order in the peaceful dawn, for soon there will be chaos. After the rooster quits crowing and the mist on the hills lifts, people begin to appear on the beach and along the wide dock. Skippers are preparing their boats to set sail or transport divers and deep-sea fishing tourists to where they can renew their spirits. Each day they embark upon a different adventure, capturing precious moments that will sustain them through stressful days on the mainland, just as our stolen moments sustain me through harrowing weeks without you. By midday, toddlers run in the shallow waves and lovers lay side by side on towels, letting lotion-drenched bodies absorb the mystical powers of a tropical sun, kneading out knots formed by a career of choice, spouse of choice, lifestyle of choice, loosening muscles constricted by daily duties that weigh us down and send us looking for where the clock stops, where time stands still, where palm trees, sun, surf, and sand merge as one priceless therapy session. Early evening brings a subtle breeze to lick at hot oiled skin and clear semi-conscious thoughts of selling everything we own and leaving everything we are to come here and be someone else, anyone else. The lights begin to glow in the lamps that dot the shore and line the dock of the tiny mystical inlet. The harbor changes color like a chameleon, from sea greens and misty blues to shades of melon and peach as a tender sunset crosses the shoreline. In the middle of the night, I lean on the rail and feel as one with this setting, as I now feel as one with you. The sprinkling of lights everywhere give feathery shadows to the palm leaves, moving ever so slightly in the balmy, barely distinguishable breeze. Sounds are noticeably nocturnal, hushed, reverent. Lush greenery rustles, swaying like a whisper, and the tide is but a tiny ripple kissing the sand. Boats in the harbor are moored with creaking ropes that strain against the lapping sea. Silent twinkling stars light hills beyond the bay, Nothing stirs in the pre-dawn but my imaginings. A morning serenade from the neighboring rooster awakes me. The native birds are quiet, but can be heard in the late afternoon as a frenzied chorus of chirping in the bushes beside the path, traveled endlessly by brown barefooted beings. I know the routine well. Besides the sounds, the life outside my railing on this miniature island beachfront postcard with the long wide dock and glistening sea blue bay, it is holding me hostage for a fraction of time, an instant. It is a taste of what life can be at its most elusive height of non-reality, just as you are. I have come to know your sounds, your touch. Memories of you tickle me like a soft tropical breeze. Who you are has melded into who I am, similar to this view, this inlet, this bay of sailboats silhouetting the horizon. You are my paradise. You fill me up with your poetry like exotic flowers, delicate, fragile, oozing a sweet scent, luring me in, seducing my senses. Like blossoms on the breeze, salt spray in my hair, your hands on my body, caressing, arousing, tasting, tantalizing. Your love is like shimmering colors in the mist, with no hope on the horizon, as we dare to dream beyond where even sailboats boldly roam. I lie near the shoreline where waves rush over me, foamy, frothy, and glistening as they soak into the sand beside me, as I sink into your strong arms, fall into your mirage of safekeeping from the world for only an instant, like paradise. Fleeting, costly, not obtainable, not really, not for long, not forever, not for everyday, tangible, touchable reality, because we have lives to return to, loved ones to protect, lies to tell. Why do we hide who we really are? What are we really all about? Why do we cling to images and illusions that define us through others, but not through our own eyes? How did fear and deceit come to rule us? What courage it would take to give up the falsehoods we hide behind, to respect others with our honesty. We are cheating those who trust in us to be true, cheating on private beaches with stolen moments, cheating paradise. What could be more foolish than that? I am sad to leave this room and this view that I have grown so accustomed to. I will mourn the loss of my short stay in paradise. I will never forget the sounds and the moods, the various settings of light and shadow. Like the back of my hand, I know this picture of perfection, these palm trees, lush hills, and sleek sailboats. This harbor will live forever in my mind, only its details fading with time. But the monstrous dark lava dock will remain crystal clear to me always, because it is part of the real world, the everyday busy working world. It is the link from fantasy to reality, the lifeline that clearly defines the truth of the matter. I cannot return again to your open arms any more than I can ever forget our time in paradise, our last hurrah, our final kiss, our love that can only leave a wake of destruction in its path. An illusion of integrity merely makes a mockery of it. And so the tiny picture postcard of our shared fantasy will sit unassumingly in the journal of my life. And if I could write upon the back and nail it to your door, my sweet, lost, forbidden love, it would simply say that paradise comes with a cost, and that price is more than I can bear.
Yeah, that is a great lead into what we're going to do tonight. So, how many of you pictured the place? How did you do that? Did you hear sounds? Did you hear the wind blowing? Did you hear the birds chirping? Did you hear those things? Were you able to touch? Did you feel the heat? Did you feel the oily skin? Did you smell the oily skin? The sand, the waves, all that sort of stuff, right? So, great imagery, great use of metaphor in there too, but imagery is what we're going to focus on tonight. So some really great sensory writing there, right? We saw things. We in our mind, we saw things, we felt things, we felt things with our touch, we felt them on our skin. I smelled, she didn't say it, but I smelled rotten seaweed. I saw broken shells I smelled the ocean, right? You know, people say I smell the salt, but I discovered in culinary school salt has no smell. It's just that smell of rotting ocean that we smell, that we go, oh, the salt. So Irene and I, my lovely wife Irene, are gonna talk a little bit about sensory. So I forgot to have somebody introduce us, so I'm gonna do that. So I'm Mike Cooper. I'm the president of Central Oregon Writers Guild. I teach writing at OSU Cascades, COCC. Irene and I have a business, the Blank Pages, which we're doing primarily salons. We also run a 10-month writing program called Forge that goes January through October. We both do editorial work, and Irene writes. I filled out her little. I name tag for her because she was busy, and where it says I just wrote everything. So Irene does poetry, she does creative nonfiction, she does fiction, she has written copy for all kinds of people. She does book reviews, she writes and writes and writes. She's got 2 novels out in the world, Committal and Forward, book of poetry, Spirit Change, and another book of poetry that's coming out next year called
Even My Dreams Are Over. Can't remember the name of my book. Let's get anxiety. It's not a book yet.
And Irene is also teaching in the graduate program at Oregon State. She just started this term teaching at OSU in the MFA graduate program. So sensory. So we're going to talk mostly about sensory tonight, but we're going to talk probably more specifically about the ones that we don't use as often. So we use visual a lot. We'll show images a lot. And we'll use feel a lot, right? And feel can be, I'm hot, I'm cold, I've been touched, I've burnt myself, this feels soft, this feels hard, that sort of stuff, right? So we use those a lot in our writing, but our other senses, taste, smell, and sound, we don't use quite as much, right? So we're gonna concentrate a little bit on those. And the point of using sensory, this is that old creative writing school adage, show don't tell, right? So I'm going to tell you, show don't tell. If you hear that from people, then they're not seeing the whole picture, because sometimes tell is good and sometimes show is good. We're going to talk about show tonight. We're going to talk about bringing the reader in. So John Gardner, I think he wrote The Art of Fiction. He talks about reading as a dream, that you're being immersed into a dream. Right? So I think of it this way: if I'm sitting in my little red comfy chair at home with a book in my lap and I'm reading along, I am suddenly not sitting in my red comfy chair with a book in my lap, looking at pieces of wood pulp with little black marks on it, right? And what I am is I'm in a dream. I'm believing this other thing. I'm in this place. As Kat was reading, I was on the beach, right? And not only was I on the beach physically, but I was emotionally going through the challenges that this person was having. I'm feeling, oh, that's, this is sad. This is gripping me. And that's what's happening in my dream. When I pop out of the dream, suddenly I'm sitting in my comfy red chair with wood pulp and little black marks. You don't want to let your reader out of the dream, right? The idea is to keep the reader in the dream. And sensory will do that. Sensory will bring you in. We'll feel things. We all have those same 5 senses, and we probably have a dozen more. But these 5 senses, how we perceive the world, when we're utilizing those, we're part of that program, right? So Irene just passed out some stuff, and we're gonna look at some literature that uses these tools, sensory tools. Then we're gonna do 3 writing exercises based on sensory, and we're going to have them be kind of Valentine's Day-ish. Okay, so I'm going to pass it up, Irene, and we'll start looking at the stuff.
At the stuff. So we're going to talk about smell. I've written a series of short stories called The Olfactorist, which is a made-up thing, but in my mind, it's a scientist who is concerned with the sense of smell and its loss and its permutations and its connection to memory, which is largely why we're going to talk about it today, because smell is the fastest, speediest express train to memory. Not necessarily accurate memory, but memory. It's the way back machine. I have 4 excerpts here under smell on sensory writing. Can I have 4 reader volunteers? 1, 2, 3, 4. Go for it.
Shall I stand up there and read?
You can probably stand up right where you are and just read that first one.
Number 1, Patricia Hamill, the florist's daughter. The flower shop was here, and it was my father's domain. But it was also marvelously other. This place heavy with the drowsy scent of velvet petaled roses and Provençal freesias in the middle of winter. Damp earth spring fragrance of just watered azaleas and cyclamen, all mixed up with the headachy smell of bitter chocolate.
Fabulous reading. Thank you. Let's move right into 2.
Keep going.
Number 2 is. Betsy?
Anne Lamott, Grace Eventually, Thoughts on Faith. After a while, I stretched out on one of the benches and closed my eyes. The kerosene smelled like lacquer, and I kept feeling waves of nausea. My bones were cold. I could isolate the icy scent of pine trees that sneaked through the walls. Sometimes Grace is a ribbon of mountain air that gets in through the cracks.
Lovely. Thank you. Nana?
Judy Bloom, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. We moved on the Tuesday before Labor Day. I knew what the weather was like the second I got up. I knew because I caught my mother sniffing under her arms. She always does that when it's hot and humid to make sure her deodorant's working. I don't use deodorant yet. I don't think people start to smell that until they're at least 12. So I've still got a few months to go.
And 4, take us home.
With Bart guy, weed the people. The smell of a grow room is the scent of transpiration, of cocoon exertion. It's the trapped sweat of a high school locker room, the funk of a hockey jersey steaming on a radiator.
Well, I can tell from your accent, you've been in the hockey area. You're from up north, right? I am, yeah.
So what's popping? All those were great readings. Thank you so much. And what's popping out? Yeah, something specific that leapt up at you from any of those.
The headachy smell of bitter chocolate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that got me too. Yeah, headachy smell of bitter chocolate.
The smells are vivid, which you don't often usually hear. The smells are more, I don't know, opaque or something. These are written vividly.
Yeah, that's a great word. It actually kind of centers into it. And the thing about sensory writing and memory and all of these other things is that each of your readers are going to have a specific and different reaction to whatever you write. Even the word headache is going to mean something different to everybody in the room. And the idea is that you come as close to this thing as you can, and then trust the reader's going to take it away. So the things for me that popped up, and there are things that play into smell that aren't necessarily smell. There's sort of a synesthesiac, I think I made that word up, to velvet petaled roses. I kind of smell velvet petaled before I even get to roses. I have a little whiff off of there. And the Anne Lamott, I always love that too. The kerosene smell, I think we always know that scent of, petroleum and gas and all of these things definitely bring up, whether you like it or whether you don't like it, the lacquer. She brings us to waves of nausea, and my bones were cold. Sounds like a very declarative sentence. It really has nothing to do with smell, but I like what she's doing there in the sense that you don't actually feel your bones unless perhaps they're broken. But this idea of my bone was cold brings you so into the body, which is the whole point of this discussion tonight, is to get into the place that is not your intellectual center, to get into the place where things will vibrate within your actual corporeal form that will inform your reading. As I like to say, the mind, the brain is the last stop on the train. Everything else has to happen before that point. What else we got? Judy Bloom, who's not Judy Bloom, smell bad till they're at least 12. We wet adolescents can attest to that, certainly. And then of course that last one, the high school locker room, the funk is a great word. of a hockey jersey steaming on a radiator. Shall we write or shall we?
Do you wanna, yeah, do you wanna break these up?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
maybe.
okay, so we're gonna do a writing exercise, so grab a chocolate. The red ones are 60% cocoa, the purple ones are 72% cocoa. So more cocoa better.
We will do 3 writing exercises tonight. We'll do 3 kind of approaches to getting at this. So anything when you're sitting at home and you've got your 10 minutes or you have your 15 minutes, or, you know, dear Lord, if you have your 6 hours, it can be very difficult to get going. So it's nice to have a couple of easy prompts in your back pocket. And our first one is just going to be a free write. Strikes fear in the hearts of many, the free write, a timed free write. What shall we time it at, my darling?
I think we're gonna do 5 minutes, so
That sounds
free
good.
writing, who, has everyone done free writing? Yes, fine. people.
Yeah. Mumble, mumble,
So-
watermelon.
The idea behind free writing is, there's for the sake of this, but, the idea of free writing is to continue writing. So when I think of writing,
Yes. Exactly.
when I think of writing, yeah, I'm gonna say, if you don't have something to write with, page there. The idea of free writing is to just keep going. So if you don't have something to say, I don't have something to say, but just keep your pen moving, okay?
The other thing about the free write is start from where you are. So the idea of that paper is going to make a sound as you move to open it. Start from exactly the point that you can start observing. So the fact that you have already held it in your hand is a place to start. Ripping the foil is another place to start.
And we've given you the place to start. So before you write, open up that chocolate, smell it, feel it. Let it melt between your fingers. Break off a piece, put it in your mouth. And in culinary school, they told us to press the chocolate above your, behind your front teeth with your tongue. To sort of mush it in there and let it melt, right? That's how you can tell the grit of the chocolate, how refined it is, and it's a good place to smell because we do a thing called retrofalction, which is where we smell something and we taste it when we smell it. Okay, so have the chocolate for a little bit, and then we'll start the timer.
I like that phrase, depress the chocolate. It's
Did I
like you
say
could tell
depress?
us, you could tell really sad stories about your childhood.
Did I say
Really,
depress?
really depress the chocolate.
Depressive. All right, so play around with the chocolate for a little bit and we'll set a 5-minute timer for you. All right, everybody ready? So whatever comes to you from this experience. So those of you at home, you can just follow along. Paige is going to post the readings on here, but we'll put them on the website after. We'll make a link to this when we put the recording up. And if you've got chocolate at home and something to smell and taste, just grab something out of the refrigerator or your kitchen or something.
All right, understanding full well that that was a very parsimonious piece of chocolate. If he's standing in a Ghirardelli factory, that would have been a different story. Also, Michael, I got a Godiva chocolate advent calendar this year. There's almost no going back. Yeah, we wound up, our original plan was to just switch off days. And then we wound up splitting them down the middle every day because they were not to be missed.
And then in January, we bought a bunch of good diamond chocolates.
Yeah.
To keep the
Very suggestible.
train going.
All right, who will be so brave and generous as to share? Scott.
If I can read it. Jesus, what a time to be cutting down on sugar. What am I gonna do with this goddamn thing? Just a corner or a quarter? Put the rest in pocket? Melt all over the goddamn, well, I don't know, half, I'll do half. Well, that'd be about 45 calories, puts me over for the day. Never gonna get down to 32s. I'll have to get 33s. They don't make 33s. It'll have to be 34s, but 34s are why she left me. Well, there's always Susie. She doesn't care about waist size as long as I tell her her hair looks good. Damn, there it is, melting through my pocket. Have to eat all of it now.
Nothing like a digression that really just spins all the way out. I love that. Well. Yes, ma'am.
Carrot Ellie, how many times did I take the family on the clacking cable car down to Fisherman's Wharf to see the vats of chocolate swirling in the machine? The rotting fish odor and the stale nets drying, the receding tide giving up a raw stench was no competition for the wafting of the chocolate. Better than coffee, better than burgers on the grill, better than popcorn. No wonder this place is this piece is wrapped up in royal purple.
Burgers on the grill, popcorn, it just kept coming. Yeah, and also that idea of that family event. You know, also the kind of things you eat when you're on vacation, when you're all together someplace. That was terrific.
I don't have much low voice, I'll try. I see the beautiful, dark richness, anticipation. Do I just let the smell make me dream? Or do I dive right in the dark green scent of so many memories tied to this aroma? I peel the paper back and I'm hit with its divine power to move me. I am transported to the melting taste of fun times shared with family and my twin sister. A celebration of birthdays filled with heavenly scenes of pennies inside a cake wrapped in foil. Such loveliness.
I didn't make that for with your sister.
The line before, I am transported to the melting taste of fun times.
Melting taste of fun time. Yeah, that's great.
Mhm. Yeah, and all that divinity, all that, that reaching up for the ineffable. Chocolate is a little bit about that. Other things are too, right? But that idea of something bigger than ourselves. Yeah. Thank you. Lovely. How about one more? Yes, ma'am.
The shiny wrapper, like a valuable gem glistening, except it's trash. The treasure is inside, eagerly revealed with fumbling fingers. Some wrappers emphasize the good things take effort. Then the chocolate, a dark void in contrast to the shiny trash, is finally free. I fancy I can swallow the cocoa and sugar, a balm for any with insult. It cracks with a crunch and rests on the tongue, melting slowly through the lips. The chocolate is the break of a cloud shadow on a ruthlessly sunny day. The cool splash of water on a face flushed red after a run.
Thank you. So many good sounds in there. The crack, the splash, absolutely. Yes. And gentlemen in the corner.
Oh, I have a little bit different take on it. As I wrote it, I didn't know this before. Chocolate, the muddy ooze of it between the roof of my mouth and my tongue, to really, really taste. I don't think I even thought before how hateful it actually is. No, not the intellectual thought of the sugar that is being mainlined. Even more specifically, nasty knowledge of some benzene used process. Read that somewhere. But the taste, the chocolate, it's musty, not merely earthy, something insidious, wormy, crawling. Suddenly I do not like it. I doubt in this moment I shall ever return to liking it. Did I even really ever like it? Was that liking merely cultural pressure? How many other tastes will fall from grace like the veil in my eyes?
Mm. It's got to be a little of that one to back off the pocket chocolate. Yeah.
You just ruined chocolate for everyone. That was
If
great.
that
I
could be
mean,
a thing.
starting off with the word muddy, right? That's a real contradiction in your mouth, right? My sister used to make mud pies and I made me taste it. I remember that.
Speaking of taste, it's next on our sensory journey. So Michelle Donner, hope I'm saying that name correctly, although I'm very familiar with her because she's the lead musician of one of my daughter's favorite bands, Japanese Breakfast. And she wrote this memoir, Crying in 8 March, a couple of years ago, and it just won't get off that New York Times bestseller list, darn it. And I'm gonna read a little bit from that one. What I never seem to forget is what my mother ate. She was a woman of many usuals. Half a patty melt on rye with a side of steak fries to share at the Paris Cafe after a day of shopping. An unsweetened iced tea with a half packet of Splenda, which she would insist she'd never use on anything else. Minestrone she'd order steaming hot, not steaming hot, with extra broth from the Olive Garden. On special occasions, half a dozen oysters on the half shell with champagne mignonette and steamy hot French onion soup from Jake's in Portland. She was maybe the only person in the world who'd request steamy hot fries from the McDonald's drive-thru in earnest. Jam pong, spicy seafood, noodle soup, extra vegetables from Cafe Soul, which she always called Soul Cafe, transposing the syntax of her native tongue. She loved roasted chestnuts in the winter, though they gave her horrible gas. She liked salted peanuts with light beer. She drank 2 glasses of Chardonnay almost every day, but would get sick if she had a third. She ate spicy pickled peppers with pizza. At Mexican restaurants, she ordered finely chopped jalapenos on the side. She ordered dressings on the side. She hated cilantro, avocados, and bell peppers. She was allergic to celery. She rarely ate sweets, with the exception of the occasional pint of strawberry Haagen-Dazs, a bag of tangerine jelly beans, 1 or 2 See's chocolate truffles around Christmas time, and a blueberry cheesecake on her birthday. She rarely snacked or took breakfast. She had a salty hand. So if we're talking about taste, any answer is a good answer. What do you notice about that piece? What is and maybe is not there?
A lot of food.
It's a lot of food.
And it's steamy hot.
A lot of steamy hot. Is that a taste? It's a sensation. And I would argue the steamy hot is really working toward voice, right? Not only is it always in quotation marks, but it's something her mother said. All of this in the past tense, by the way. So that's also something that starts to work on us as we read it, even though we don't really know the whole situation. And the listening. There aren't a lot of actual tastes in this. But what do you experience when you hear half a dozen oysters on the half shell with champagne mignonette?
Texture.
Absolutely, right? Texture, right on top of the list. What else might you get from that? That tartness, right? That shallot and that lemon or lime. Maybe some of that brine as well, which is people who like oysters really get that briny thing going on there. And of course, we have some of our cultural markers, McDonald's French fries. You know, arguably one of the best things on the planet and worst. Okay, but most of us have some, if we haven't tasted them, we have smelled them. And then I find this rather hilarious. She rarely ate sweets, which I buy. I trust the speaker. I believe it. They're so on top of their details that I am on board with everything they have to say. But she rarely ate sweets except for Haagen-Dazs, jelly beans, truffles, and blueberry cheesecake. which when you would line it up, doesn't seem that much, but it is an onslaught of sugar at the end of this piece. It's an onslaught of sweetness. And she has sort of progressed. This is a whole book.
Plus, it's not just a taste of strawberry hot dog, it's a pint, it's a bag of jelly beans.
She rarely ate sweets, but ate a pint of ice cream and a bag of jelly beans. So delightful.
What struck me is she is very specific about the way she wants food to feel in her mouth.
Yeah.
Gooey noodles and the steaminess on your palate and anything that would be liquidy running through your mouth. And that's consistent throughout the whole narrative here.
When the title of the book, Crying in H Mart, comes from going to the Asian, I believe it's a Korean market, to eat noodles because her mother has died and she misses her mother. And her mother isn't just died, it's this extended grief that she is feeling. And this is one of the ways she travels back. And, you know, that whole idea of going back to this market, which is just steeped in everything her mother loved, texture being so on top of that. And that is a touch, right? But also very specifically, when it's in the mouth, we're gonna slide it on into taste as well.
I don't understand what's meant by the last sentence.
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't.
Well, there's, you wanna address that?
I'm just taking away, like, this is such a great characterization, or like a character sketch of the mother, that it's like, kind of the senses are a way into that, but they're really at the service of describing the person. You know?
Yeah,
So like the end is a character trait, you know, like, maybe there's an innuendo there, maybe we find out later she's backhands her daughter sometimes, you know, maybe there's more to that, I don't know, but.
well, it's an excellent point. So it's not the end of the piece, it's not even the end of the section. So she will talk about cooking, we'll get there. But I would like to bring up Shelby's point of the multiple possible meanings of she had a salty hand. Now, if she said if we had said she had a salty mouth, you know exactly what she was talking about, right? Then she'd have my mouth, you know, some longshoreman, keep it clean, Irene kind of thing going on. But she says salty hand, and I love the lift that brings to this paragraph. And that's something I love to talk about at the end. Doesn't have to be at the end of the piece, but the end of a section even is to lift and propel the reader into the next spot, whether that's their own head or the next part of the piece, because she is saying, this is what she ate, this is how she ate it, this is what she ate, this is how she ate it. And then we have that very confusing, she had a salty hand. It's just a way to pivot a little bit at the end of your piece, to make the list do something more or other. So let us write. I've said the word list 8 times. Guess what we're gonna do?
All right, so this is, sparkling apple cider with a raspberry here.
If anyone wants to name the cocktail, this is a creative writing group, feel free. Right now it's sparkling apple cider with a raspberry in it. That's the name of it. We didn't really put a lot of effort into it. In a plastic cup, we could add that.
Better than a pill that you normally find in this cup.
Yeah, that's what it is.
You know, that last piece, what I got out of it was the love the daughter had for the mother, because even though she never says that in there, the details she remembered about her and the way she remembered them. Showed that she picked up on all of that, and so I felt some love there.
Yeah, I totally agree. That attention is definitely an action, or can be an action of love. That kind of deep observation is a gesture of love. And it's also a way, you know, when we speak of elegy being for the living, all of it being for the living, for that matter, it's the idea of not necessarily trying to hold, but to be able to gather that around again. So I think absolutely it is love language, as food is for many people, a love language.
There's no animosity in the way she do. Remember, Justin.
There is a little salt though.
Yes.
Right, there's a little
But
salt.
I see that as endearing.
Yeah. It's
Okay, I
spam.
haven't read the book, I need to put it on.
Well, no, mothers are complicated beings. And mother-daughter relationships are complicated
A little
relationships.
salty.
A little salty, right? So once you have enjoyed your yet to be named cocktail, mocktail, listing. What you feel in your mouth, what you're thinking about, it can be totally associative. You can completely go off the rails and not be talking about apple cider vinegar and raspberries. Lists.
It's sparkling cider.
Is it sparkling?
It is sparkling.
It is
cider.
sparkling.
So you
It's
can
not apple
listen to
cider
it.
It's
anymore,
not
right?
vinegar, it's sparkling.
It's sparkling cider. Did I say vinegar?
Without the
Sparkling
vinegar.
cider.
Which would also be interesting.
Yeah, well, and according to all the prevention magazine, it's also very good for you, but that would be another meeting.
So pay attention to what happens in your mouth too with this. Cider has malic, or apples have malic acid and raspberries have acetic acid, and acid does something in your mouth. Feel it.
So when I say listing, and I'm going to, I wish I had the kind of memory I wish I had, but there in the 4th century, there was a Japanese woman of the court, made lists. Her poetry was essentially lists. So when I say lists, it's not necessarily just chair, rug, gray, blue, balloon. It can be phrases as well. You know, the bite of cherry that summer, it can be phrases as well as just words. You don't have to limit yourself just to a list of objects. They can be fragments. The idea though is to not try to make too much grammatical or syntactical sense out of it. Just throw the images on the page for 5 minutes.
Following that, I can't handle it. Strangers that I'm like, we've all been on this, right? Schools, mom, baby, balls, and thank you very much for your advice. It's very nice of you. Very nice of you. Thank you. Thank you. When you know that, you something so cool. Thank you very much. Sure. I would dance. It was just too long.
All right, finish up that list. Oh, that was my opportunity. Where'd you go, Amanda?
All right. Plastic champagne Dixie is cold to the touch. Smell is sharp, almost vinegary. Fizzes in my mouth. Unique taste, reminiscent of apples. It is apple cider. Flavor fills my nostrils. Clean, smooth taste. Pleasant and delicious. Bright and red berry. Soft texture, seeds dotted within. Sourness in the raspberry skin. All gone. I wish for more. Memories make apples linger in my mind. Fingers remember the cool touch of the plastic cup.
We've got more.
Yeah, there's more, Amanda.
I like the first 3 words of that, plastic champagne Dixie, right? That puts us into again, sort of a weird juxtaposition, right? Champagne is such an elevated word, right? And you have plastic and Dixie on either side of it, so right?
Mary?
Familiar, New Year's toast, liquid, wet, mushy berry, heart seed, bubbles, masticated fiber, Julian cider, camping in the rain, cider press, Bob Vansel's high school mishap, wet, tasty, washes away the bitter taste of chocolate from my mouth.
What's that about mishap?
So Bob Vansel was a member of this group. He passed away, I think, last year.
Bob.
And he wrote this delightful story. When he was in high school, the kids would get together and they'd make apple cider. But this one year, something happened and it fermented. And they used it was their annual fundraising scheme. But this year they sold more apple cider than ever before because it was,
A little bit.
fortified.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That took me to that.
So one little line was though in the middle of that, right?
Right.
That little taste of cider takes you to a whole story, right? And so, one of the most in creative writing, one of the things that we talk about a lot in sensory, particularly in taste, is a piece of Marcel Proust's Swan's Way, where he takes a Madeleine cookie, one of those little French cookies, and dips it into some lavender tea, tastes it, and goes off on this childhood experience, right? Which is super exciting for Marcel Proust, right? But we also want our readers to go off on that journey, right? So when we say something, and again, we have no idea what happens when we put our work out into the world. We have no idea who's going to pick it up, what happened with them and everything. But when you put a sensory thing out into the world, we all have a chocolate thing. We all have a berry thing. We all have a cider thing. We all have, if we've tasted it before, and if we haven't tasted it before, we'll compare it to something else that we have tasted before, and then we'll have that story, right? So you're creating stories in the mind of your reader that you have no idea what you're doing, right? Who else wants to share?
Gentle bubbles, sun ripened, bright summer celebration. The clink of glasses with a huge ear, the pop of a bottle, and the person who can't help but say, "Hey-o." The lack of fear of tomorrow, the relaxed smiles of those who are not posing for a flash, the generous words of loosened tongues, the compliments and kindnesses of people who are not afraid of being found out, who have left cynicism behind with the pop of a cork.
Right. So we've turned that into a champagne experience, right? When in fact we're drinking apple juice.
And
right?
we've left cynicism behind. I think we gotta linger on that for a moment. I love that trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more.
At the writers' gathering, I go down the apple cider, which tasted more like overly sweet Pinot Gris than apple. Next, the raspberry plumped on my tongue. A dozen roses exploded up my nose. Thank you, raspberry, for reminding me it's Valentine's Day.
So the list too, and Mary really got to it, is the idea that sometimes, what you want to say is going to pop up in the middle of what you write. In the pre-write, that often happens. I ask people to go back and find the heat, find the language that's speaking to them, not necessarily even content, but the words that are actually moving them is a way. And, take that yellow highlighter or circle it, or just start a new page. But the idea, sometimes in the middle of the list, is it Ron Padgett who wrote the poem, How to Be a Good Person? You might know that poem. So it has all things like sit up straight and watch your posture and brush your teeth and remember to floss, and it's list. In the middle of it, it says, if someone injures your child, blow their head off. And then it goes back to tie your shoes, go to bed at a good decent hour, and what have you. It's just smack in the middle of a poem. And then all of a sudden the poem is about something else. It's about anger, it's about vengeance, it's about the fear that you have for your loved ones, it's about all of this. And that remains with you after this poem, but it's couched in all of these seeming mundanities, right? And this sort of, how to. All right, we're gonna move into an exit. Did anybody see the 100-foot journey? I think it was on one of those channels we got for free for a month. It was about a family from India who moves to France. In the northern France, and they're restaurant people, so they're going to open up an Indian restaurant. Did you see it?
Yeah.
It's delightful, was it? Well, that's fine,
Wonderful.
but it was delightful. So it was a book. It's nice to know all you out there writing books. They still make movies out of books. First of the year, I know I am. So, this is an excerpt from the 100-Foot Journey. So anyway, this Indian family moves across, the way from a Michelin star restaurant, and it's in this town. Nothing is going on in this French town except it's a Michelin star restaurant, a lot of cows, Indian restaurant right across the road. Culture clash ensues. Delicious, I tell you, and not surprisingly, the snack bicycles became a commercial success. And so, encouraged by their good fortune, my grandparents cleared an abandoned lot on the far side of the Nepean Sea Road. It was there that they erected a primitive roadside restaurant. They built a kitchen of 3 tandoori ovens and a bank of charcoal fires on which rested iron kadeh of mutton masala, all under a US Army tent. In the shade of the banyan tree, they also set up some rough tables and slung hammocks. Grandmother employed Bapu, a cook from a village in Kerala, and to her northern repertoire, she now added dishes like onion teal and spicy grilled prawns. Soldiers and sailors and airmen washed their hands with English soap in an oil drum, dried themselves on the preferred towel, I believe, and then clambered up the hammock strung under the shady tree. By then, some relatives from Gaiharat had joined my grandparents, and these young men were our waiters. They slapped wooden boards, makeshift tables across the hammocks and quickly covered them with bowls of skewered chicken and basmati and sweets made from butter and honey. During slow moments, grandmother wandered out in the long shirt and trousers we call salwar kameez, threading her way between the sagging hammocks and chatting with the homesick soldiers, missing the dishes of their own countries. What do you like to eat? She'd ask. What do you eat at home? And the British soldiers told her about steak and kidney pies, of the steam that arose when the knife first plunged into the crust and revealed the pie's lumpy viscera. Each soldier tried to outdo the other, and soon the tent filled with oohing and coarse and excited palaver. And the Americans, not wishing to be outdone by the British, joined in, earnestly searching for the words that could describe a grilled steak coming from cattle-fed Florida swamp grass. A grilled steak coming from cattle fed on Florida swamp grass is some of the best writing I read this week, I'm going to say. Not only for that idea, I mean, grilled steak, what do you get there? You get sizzle, you get that sort of oil in the air, you get that fat you get almost a visual look of this cloud. Whether or not you cotton to it, it is a very specific smell. But coming from cattle fed on Florida swamp grass, what does that even mean? What can it mean?
Well, it's from Florida, right? And then they're wild, they're eating the grass out in the, like Marjorie Rawlings, like what she would have fed her family. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, well, the wild was the part that caught my attention, right? You don't go down to the feed store and buy Florida swamp grass.
It's like a frontiers reference too. And it's like rugged and, you know, as opposed to British, very orderly pies. We let our cattle run all over the swamp.
Right, so it's that British and American thing, right? And the great American mythology of there are no, of course there are, but there are no borders or boundaries or limits. But manifest destiny right there in this idea of feeding the cattle, and also this idea of nostalgia, because they're soldiers, they're not at home, and they're eating this Indian food, which is no doubt delicious. But she gets them talking about their native food. She gets them talking about their native food so that they can feel this sort of attachment, this sort of emotion. And the idea they're going to outdo each other at this point. Now we have sort of a familial competition where we can be who we are and also have a little fun. You know, she's created this gregarious scene. And they've done it with a few hammocks and a couple of charcoal banks and just pull under an army tent. Right? And she's created this thing where we're in India and now we're at Florida swamp grass. That's just incredibly lovely. We want to talk about sound, and we have another writing exercise, and there are the dreaded air quotes. This is a poem by Tony Hoagland. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 stanzas. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 readers. Where are wannabe poets or active poets out there? Poetry readers. Amanda, 1, 2. 2 right here, 3. These 3? Okay. Well, we got Denise's 3. I'll wrap it up with 4.
Written by Tony Hoagland. She goes out to hang the wind chime in her nightie and her work boots. It's 6:30 in the morning, and she's standing on the plastic ice chest, tiptoe to reach the crossbeam of the porch.
You're up, Shelley.
Oh, I thought it was never.
Oh.
See?
So,
Wind chime in her left hand, hammer in her right, the nail gripped tight between her teeth, but nothing happens next because she's trying to figure out how to switch number 1 with number 3.
She must have been standing in the kitchen, coffee in her hand, asleep, when she heard it. The wind blowing through the sound the wind chime wasn't making because it wasn't there.
No one, including me, especially anymore, believes till death do us part. But I can see what I would miss in leaving. The way her ankles go into the work boots as she stands upon the ice chest. The problems scrunched into her forehead. The little kissable mouth with a nail in it. So it's called wind chime. Because why? And no wrong answers. Because Tony's not here.
The absence of sound and it's the longing for that sound.
Anybody keep wind chimes? Anybody's neighbors complain?
Not yet.
Not yet. I like, so excellent that you said that too, because it is that sort of idea of wind chime, you know, until somebody finds it obnoxious, right? And that's change in the air.
It scared our blind pony. Oh. She didn't know what it was when they put the name on that one.
Oh.
So we took it off, obviously.
Well, that's kind. Yeah. But this idea, I like what Amanda's getting at too here. So sound is also the absence of sound. And that negative view, that dichotomy of that both thing is important when writing about sound. Because frequently, and especially when we're sort of bookmarking in our writing, right? You want to get a few pages in, you're doing your thing, you write the sound of, and you run away from that for a while. But sometimes you have to revisit that because of this list of words that I'm talking about here. If you don't need to rush into the onomatopoeia, you don't have to reenact the sound, but understand that certain things make certain sounds. So we just have a new wind chime. Someone gave us that's a wooden wind chime, which is not something that we've had before. And it's catching my ear all the time because what kind of sound does wood make? There's sort of a hollow. If you can start thinking about the words about wood, they're not all going to relate to sound, but it's certainly going to make you think of the sound of wood as you experience it. Or the idea of something being metallic, very useful when you're talking about taste, especially things like blood, right? But the idea of a hammer hitting a nail is you can go into that thumping move, or you can also talk about that idea of nails in the jar, of dumping nails on a table to find the one that you need for that. This sound that they're making, this action. Sound is an action. So even though you can say the sound of, it's great to kind of try to explore the vocabulary that does a little bit of the work for you. And bonus, using an active verb in which to do it. So less passive, I mean, sometimes you want that passive phrasing, and sometimes you want to get a little bit closer to the action. So words like babble, bang, beep, chime, chink, clack, clang, all of these, there's an emotional response to the sounds that the words themselves make, as well as put you closer to the thing making the sound. So if you are writing, say, a passage in which you want to talk about sitting by a train track, one of the shortcuts to doing this, regardless of whether you're going to say track is to get those K's in there, the CLs in there, this sort of repetitive that actually brings you to this idea of the train track. You're not necessarily describing sound, but you're reenacting sound in your prose or poem. Yeah, there are a lot of C words on this thing. There are other things. So the Anglo-Saxon language versus Latinic language, the Anglo-Saxon words are generally shorter with longer sounds. A word like moan, that O is long. It's one syllable, but it might as well be three for how you're going to say it out loud when you're using it. So the kind of thing like this, oh, drone is the same thing. Drone is this as well. It almost sounds like it's more than one syllable, and it's this mournful tone. So the words you pick, don't just like describe what you're trying to say, but also think sonically what the words are doing. What's another one good on here? Peek, ping, pipe, pop, you know, all those P's are really fun. Putter. Now, having said this, one of the sinkholes of working with sound is alliteration, which I'm a huge fan of. And also one can have too much, as with chocolate. So alliteration is not the only way to get there, although repetition is great. But think in terms of interior sounds, you know, like I say, that long O or the short I. It's not just the consonants that are doing the work. And alliteration, again, I'm always falling over that cliff. But the other sounds as well, the sounds that come in the middle of the words, how many times you repeat that. And also syllabically, and this is not just for poetry, it's for prose as well. You know, how long you want to spend in a place of the happiness is different from joy. And that's a choice that you'll be making. One is not interchangeable from the other. It's going to be very specific to what you're writing in the moment. So because we're talking about sound, we're going to play a little music.
So we're gonna kind of assault your senses here.
Okay.
So I'm gonna pass these around, and these are cotton balls soaked in rose water. The ingredients are water and rose. And this is, don't eat these
Yeah.
unless you want to.
And even, yeah, be careful with your sniffer.
Like elf eating all the cotton balls.
And even though we're talking about sound, we're also going to be talking about, you know, layering this experience.
So we're gonna have these two, we're gonna do your nose and your ears. Erin's gonna play some music. And as soon as we have these passed out and she gets the music started, we're gonna tell you what the writing exercise is for this, the air quotes writing exercise.
And we're going to be listening to a couple of tracks from an album called Pacific Wonderland, which is by a local musician by the name of Elisha David. So local arts.
Be careful.
5 minutes again. And this writing exercise is we have this music. We want you to draw for 5 minutes. Draw. Like whatever you draw, doodle, draw, whatever.
Your next assignment and your final assignment, should you choose to accept it, is write 3 lines. You may think of haiku. There is no syllabic Doesn't have to look like anything. 3 lines based on your experience in the past 4 minutes. And write it on top of your drawing or anywhere else, but feel free to write it
Our
on top.
experience based on what? Is that?
You're a reflection of what you just did.
Okay.
All right, as you're writing, I want to thank everybody for a great Valentine's Day date. And feel free to share your lines as we belly up to the snack bar.
Thank you, everybody that brought in some goodies to share too, because there's some good ones out there.
So, yeah, and thank you all who brought stuff in, and Amanda for bringing stuff in. There's more apple cider back there, the raspberries back there, tons of chocolate and cookies, and if you want to share your drawing with, people.
With
And,
me, share with me.
but you don't have to. We're not, this isn't the Central Oregon Artist Guild, so, no high expectations. But also take a look at each other's name tags and see what they write and talk to each other. The idea of the Writers Guild is to create community, to find other people who are doing what they're doing, right? On the back table is, our copies of this sheet. It's not what we just read. It's called 25 Century Writing Prompts to Improve Detail and Description, and I stole it from the Writer magazine. And it's got prompts for touch, smell, taste, sight, hear, and grab a copy of that on your way out to the first. And absolutely, like you said, everyone stick around and chat.